Joining us now for World Brief and the review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is our lady from the community where they are doing everything to look for a king. 60 of them now contesting from one family. Well, she's Adefemi Akinsanya.
Good morning, good
May
morning.
the best man win.
May the best man win.
Kingdom.
May the best man win.
Indeed.
Hopefully one day we'll have a queen. Who knows? Well, maybe not actually.
Yes, no, actually, Femi.
Yes.
I met somebody at an event.
Yeah.
In fact, it was at no, it was at that Leo Stan AK's event, TD Africa event. She said she's the only woman in contention to be the Awujale.
From that house.
Yes.
What's her name?
I forget her name.
We'll get to it. Good morning to you.
So there's a woman in contention. She told me she's in contention.
The time for that has passed.
So that's what she said.
So you could possibly be the
No,
Awujale.
it's not a possibility.
Deported.
I don't know.
Can we do the program?
It's not even our time yet. Good morning to you viewers. You see, this is the issue. These are the issues. Morning to you viewers. Let me tell you what is happening around the world. Okay, let's start with the United States. The United States has added Nigeria to a list of countries facing a partial travel restriction over security and documentation concerns. So essentially, this now means that traveling to the United States as immigrants on the B1, B2, the F, M and J visas are hereby suspended until further notice. Consular officers will also reduce the validity of other non-immigrant visas issued to Nigerians to the extent permitted by law. All of this, according to the White House. Now, these changes affect 15 mostly African countries. They include Angola. There's also Antigua in the Caribbean, Barbados also in the Caribbean, but Benin, Cote d'Ivoire, Dominica, Gabon, the Gambia, Malawi, Mauritania, Senegal, and Tanzania, Togo, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. Now, for Nigeria's part, the White House says the radical Islamic terrorism groups, such as Boko Haram and Islamic States, are operating freely in certain parts of Nigeria, which creates substantial screening and vetting difficulties. For Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, they join Syria and South Sudan, making up the 5 countries newly placed on the full ban list amid other entry limitations. So that's what we're seeing there. But still talking about Nigeria and the United States, a Nigerian couple, including a 24-year-old gentleman by the name of Damilola Bamboye and 23-year-old Rukeya Frazier, they've both been arrested and charged with kidnapping a federal agent in Minnesota. All of this centers on an incident which occurred when agents from the Department of Homeland Security Investigations Unit attempted to engage Bamboye, the gentleman on the left, regarding his immigration status. He is a Nigerian, and he had reportedly overstayed his student visas, prompting surveillance and enforcement action. Now, when the officers approached Bamboye, he allegedly masked his face and resisted engagement, directing Frazier, the lady you see behind me, to drive away with an agent trapped inside the vehicle. The agent, who was unfamiliar with the area, it's reported, feared that he was being abducted and called for help. Frazier allegedly continued driving despite repeated commands to stop, and they threatened to crash the car. Bamboye and Frazier are hereby facing federal charges, including resisting arrest and abducting a federal officer. However, Bamboye claimed that the officers had not properly identified themselves, and he had also talked about how he had previously suffered post-traumatic stress from a previous kidnapping experience here in Nigeria as a factor for his actions. That's what he says. Okay, moving on to the United Nations now. The former United Nations Secretary General, his name is Ban Ki-moon, he has proposed that the future UN leaders will serve a single non-renewable 7-year term, arguing that the current convention of 2 5-year terms leaves the office holder too reliant on the Council's 5 permanent members for reappointment. Now, he was addressing the Security Council just yesterday, and Ban Ki-moon did state that a single term would free the United Nations leader from subtle tyrannies of reappointment and allow them to exercise their mandate more independently. He also emphasized that this arrangement is not mandated by the UN Charter and that the General Assembly has the authority to determine the terms of appointment. Notably, Ban Ki-moon's call comes as the selection process for the next Secretary General gathers pace, with Secretary General Antonio Guterres' second term set to end next year. Now, the former UN chief also criticized the Security Council's veto power, saying that it has been used to shield permanent members, their allies and proxies from accountability, undermining the Council's credibility and ability to protect civilians. I'm sure many people would agree. Now, coming back to the African continent now, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, he has arrived in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia for a 2-day state visit, marking his first official visit to the country since 2011. Now, in a special gesture, the Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Abiy Ahmed, he personally received Modi at the Bole International Airport and he drove him himself to his hotel. Now, the Ethiopian Prime Minister also took Modi on an unscheduled visit to the Science Museum and Friendship Park, underscoring the importance of Ethiopia's relationship to this visit by the Indian Prime Minister. Now, during his visit, Modi is expected to hold comprehensive talks with Abiy Ahmed, covering political ties, also trade, development and cooperation. There's also going to be talks about defense engagement and people-to-people links. He'll also be addressing a joint session of the Ethiopian Parliament. That's actually just happening right now, sharing his views on India's democratic experience and discussing ways to strengthen India-Ethiopia relations and border cooperation in the global south. So those are your well-briefed stories. Let's first take a look at our newspaper headlines. And as ever, we begin with the front page of This Day. This Day does lead today with the reports that the Senate has approved a more conservative $60 per barrel crude oil benchmark for 2026. And it's also endorsed a 54.46 trillion naira federal budget. Also on the front page of This Day, we are seeing reports that the ICPC has received Alhaji Aliko Dangote's petition seeking a probe of the NMDPRA CEO Farouk Ahmed over alleged $5 million school fees per child and where that money comes from. That's as the House of Representatives also moved to investigate the claims. Well, moving on to another paper, we've got the New Telegraph, and the New Telegraph does report that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has assured Nigerians that the new tax laws taking effect next year will bring relief for the poor, for low-income earners and for small businesses, with exemptions on essentials such as food, education, healthcare, agriculture and shared transportation. Shall we take a look at the Daily Independent next? Wonderful. Okay, so the Daily Independent this morning does report that the House of Representatives has resolved to probe the detention of a Nigerian Air Force, that's the C-130 aircraft, and its crew still in Burkina Faso. They have been directing engagements with the Ministries of Defense and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They are also What we're seeing is lawmakers are also urging the Tinubu administration to use ECOWAS and African Union channels to secure their release at long last. Well, let's take a look at The Punch, because The Punch is looking at the federal government, and we do see that the federal government is planning to acquire 24 Italian-made M346 FA fighter jets. They are worth about 1.2 billion euros, and they are here to strengthen Nigeria's air power amid rising security threats. Moving on to The Guardian this morning. The Guardian does report that Nigeria's power industry, the supply is disrupted nationwide due to gas shortages and the 6 trillion naira in unpaid Genco debts. This is despite the government's efforts to reduce and relieve that debt with its reduction plan. And there's that 590 billion naira bond issuance to sort that out. Moving on to our UK papers very quickly. Let's take a look at the Daily Mirror. Okay, wonderful. So the UK now is saying that lawyers are said to be considering an aggressive BBC defense to the US President Donald Trump's claims over footage over his speech before the Capitol riot. The paper says that the questions are going to be asked about where Trump was on the 6th of January at the time of the unrest. So they've essentially said, listen, we apologize, don't know our apology. Well, we're ready to go. We're ready to go dirty. So let's see. Yeah. And then finally, to the Times this morning, we do have British students will now be able to study at European universities under a high-profile EU scheme for the first time since Brexit. This is quite significant if you are in the United Kingdom and you would like to study in the European Union. So those are your stories. From the World Brief to Newspaper Review. Love to hear your thoughts.
Okay, so congrats to Mrs. Elumelu. She's on the board now of Transcorp.
She is, yes.
Yeah. As regards Trump, I think they should go aggressive, because when they grill him about the riot again, a lot is going to come out. And like I said, I read the litany of cases yesterday that all proved that he had a hand in it. So yes, if they have apologized to you and you say, okay, you don't want to accept the apology, you still want to make them look bad, so let's go for it. Let's have a real legal nightmare where you have to come in there and give your own deposition as regards the matter, and then we'll see the truth. I mean, Trump did this thing. Let's stop deceiving ourselves. The only difference was, okay, they cut 2 different videos at different times.
Yes, which they should not have done.
Which they shouldn't have done, which we repudiate. But after apology, what else? And they cannot prove malice, that they did it deliberately to be able to spite him, and it didn't even affect him. Even the lawyer that he said, no, it was on VPN in Florida, he'll have to prove it. As regards the visa ban in America, see, America is a sovereign country. They can do whatever they want to do.
Yes.
But we should now look inwards. If they mention Boko Haram, the question we should ask is Boko Haram not happening here? Have we not been able to stem the tide? Because we too, for good measure, can tell Americans, don't come into this country because of the global trauma ISIS creating, like they created for those citizens. Yeah. Anyway, what they did too was equally very wrong. You know, trying to drive away with an official. Once they had caught you, you should have. But you can see American people protesting against ICE. So we too can say Americans should not come here because of ICE and everything. So now that they've said we should stay in our home, maybe we'll sit back. But the people that I really wanted them to affect, to get effect, are those that have diplomatic passports. Because those are still the leaders that will still go to America and all of that. See, the truth has to be said. Those are the real decision makers. Until we get those leaders to action, nothing will happen.
Okay, very quickly, first off, on some of the front pages of the newspapers this morning, really great news about Dr. Awele Vivian Elumelu. I say this because I had an opportunity to have a sit-down with her, and I think it's a great fit sometime last year, and I think it's a great fit for the organization. She has extensive expertise and experience. They talk about how she has worked and the organization she's led, including Avon medical practices. I know they launched their hospital in Surulere on the mainland. So she was, when I spoke to her, she was very passionate about it. You could see she's a woman who quietly gets the work done, but now it's as if the world is drawing her out of her shell. So congratulations. Really happy about that news, and I think it's a welcome addition to the very successful Transcorp Hotel, actually, I must say. Now, moving on to the story around the visa ban, just to say that some exceptions were made to some of the countries. Remember that America is going to be hosting the World Cup next year. So they say that athletes who are participating. So if you want to go to America, go and find a way to play football. It's interesting because we're just still talking about whether or not Nigeria would be going. There are sources saying that something is going to happen and Nigeria would find a way to wiggle its way into.
That.
Did you hear that?
Apparently there's something to do with the Congolese not being rightfully registered.
We're discussing that on sports yesterday. So, as Nigerians, we keep hope alive all the time and see we will be at the World Cup. But finally, on the story on the Nigerian couple who kidnapped ICE, I think there's a lot of, it has to be nuanced and there's a context around it. Number one is that the lady, Rekia, is a sister, you mentioned, of the person who was a key witness during the George Floyd murder. In fact, she recorded the altercation between he and the police. If you have a relative who has gone through that process, seeing how the police can be high-handed and someone's life was lost, you can understand their reaction. I think it's also important to mention that when she was driving, she drove to the police station. And so she might have genuinely thought that she wasn't sure whether or not her life was safe. Correct. He entered her car. It reminds me of how last man enters your car. Correct. Remember that funny, help me, I don't know where they're going. That's a similar situation of what happened. So I hope that this will be treated fairly so that they don't just, use them as an example because it is the almighty ICE. Because if we hear the detail of the story, there might be some merit to the fact that they actually thought their lives might have been in danger.
Agreed.
Okay, very quickly, Awele Elumelu. Now, the first time she appeared on this station, I asked her a question. I said, why are you not involved in your husband's business? Why is it only Tony Elumelu that we hear about? She was mortified. She could not answer the question. But since then, we have seen her increasing involvement in the business. Whether it's Avon Healthcare, what they call Avon Healthcare, which, plays to her a background as a medical doctor, or whether it is also the Tony Elumelu Foundation. And now she has been made the chairperson, effective January 1, 2026, of Transcorp Corporation. I think it's a major development. I don't want to say, it is something about the impact of the media, that sometimes when we ask people embarrassing questions, you get a reaction at the home front. But Mrs. Elumelu herself is a very competent person, well-educated. She's not just a doctor. She's also a person who has shown talent, energy, industry. She's even involved in this running competition that they do all over the world. So we can only congratulate also Tony Elumelu as a good husband who listens. And maybe perhaps, who knows, he's probably planning succession. I don't want to give examples of people who are planning succession and they involve their wives in the process. You talked about Ethiopia, right?
Yes, Ethiopia.
President Modi. I think the important thing there is about soft diplomacy. You know, diplomacy is not just a formal process. There are other aspects of it that is about the individual, that is about the personal touch. What touched me in that story is the Ethiopian Prime Minister driving, personally receiving the President of India and staying behind the wheels and driving him to go and show him certain things. It's called the personal touch. And we have seen how that in diplomacy, international diplomacy, can provide positive results. What's his name? President Putin goes to Turkmenistan. They give him a shepherd, a dog.
Yes.
He goes to Japan. They know he likes dog. They give it to him. You know, these personal touches are an important part of diplomacy, and our students of international diplomacy, we know that as an example. Ayo has already talked about the subtext of the arrest of Rekia Frazier and Babingboye, the Nigerian. But two things to add to it. Apart from the fact that the woman is related to the woman who recorded the George Floyd incident in 2021.
Yes.
Now, they are also saying that Babingboye's visa expired, that he overstayed. So that's also the part of the subtext. But we all know that the ICE has been overactive, hyperactive, and overaggressive in the Twin Cities, in the state of Minnesota, targeting not just Somali immigrants, but also other persons. But all of this will hark back to President Trump and his determination to check immigrants, which is the thing about Nigeria now being classed along with countries like Sudan, Zambia, Zimbabwe. I hope everybody won't take offense. Guinea-Bissau, all those countries, Syria, Yemen, Iran, Niger, Chad, and all of that, for reasons that you can't be sure about their documents. Well, at the level of diplomacy, I think that the Nigerian authorities can still engage. But are we surprised? We are not surprised. Nigeria having been classified as a country of particular concern, this is the kind of outcome you get. Thank you very much.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
And I hope you people find solution to your issue.
It's not my issue, we're innocent bystanders.
Thank you so much. We'll see you again tomorrow. Once again, congratulations, Dr. Awele Elumelu.